And a very warm welcome to the podcast, Bob Martin. How are you today, Bob?
I'm doing real well. I appreciate your having me on your platform. It's wonderful.
No, not at
Glad to
all.
be here.
I'm intrigued. I'm really looking forward to this one. So tell me, Bob, before we get started, where are you right now on planet Earth?
I am in Elon, North Carolina,
Oh,
a
nice.
small college town about an hour and a half from Raleigh, North Carolina.
And if you were to advertise North Carolina as a holiday destination, what would you say about it, Bob? What's so nice about North Carolina that you're living there?
You have the mountains and you have the ocean. You have a short summer and a short winter and long springs and falls.
And what about temperature wise? What make us jealous here in Ireland? What's it like at the moment?
Well, in North Carolina, what we say about the temperature is that I have my galoshes and I have my sandals and I have my fur-lined boots. I have my bathing suit and I have my jacket. I am ready for the next week.
Okay. All in one day. Okay. That makes perfect sense. So actually I have an aunt. If my aunt is listening, she lives in South Carolina. She's near
Uh-huh,
Myrtle
uh-huh.
Beach.
Mhm.
So probably neighbors or well not neighbors. I know America's a big country, but these are close enough, I suppose. So Bob, I gave a little bit of an introduction about your background. So let the listeners know a little bit more about yourself.
Well, where would we like to start?
You start
I,
anywhere. Start from the
I
beginning.
I have 75 years under my belt, and there's many more days behind me than there are in front of me. So we'll start there. But I grew up with great parents in many ways. They were immigrants. My father was from Hungary. My mother was Roma Gypsy. But they had their families, and all of our ancestors were wiped out by either the Bolsheviks or the Nazis and the like. And so we were not a religious family.
Right.
My folks came to the conclusion that there wasn't a God that was worth worshiping that would allow all of that to happen. And but my dad was a very meticulous man, a very virtuous man, and my mother just adored him. So I had those models in my life. I'm grateful for it. Um, Fast forward, I went. I flunked out of Boston University. I went to a college on a football scholarship, but broke my leg, and in the very same week, broke up with my high school sweetheart. So
Oh dear.
I don't think I went to a single class for the rest of the year and wound up flunking out, and then kind of drifted a little bit. Um, and then there was a young man who was a good friend, and he kept telling me that I should be a lawyer. Kept pushing me, and finally he went out. He got a job, and he earned enough money to buy the entrance ticket to the law school aptitude test.
Okay.
uh, and bought a money order with it, so I couldn't cash it, and gave it to me and said, "You should take this test and you should go be a lawyer." And so, how do you say no to something like that?
Right.
And so I went and I took the test, and it wound up that one law school wasn't even accredited yet. It was brand new law school, and they took a chance on me and a bunch of other misfits, and we went to law school. And John, this fella, he stayed by my side. He even enrolled in a community college to become a paralegal, and we were going to be Perry Mason and his detective Paul Drake. It's and He stayed by my side and was always there to support me. And I passed the bar and I was sworn in, and I was lucky enough to intern in the district attorney's office in Miami-Dade County, Florida, which that office was quite big. I mean, we had 125 assistant district attorneys
Right.
in that office, so you could imagine. And um, I got sworn in. In court, and 3 days later, John met this girl, and they decided they would get high. And he had given up his use of drugs, but they decided to get high, and he overdosed, and he died.
Oh wow. Okay, I'm sorry.
Um, but I never really grieved it. I've always seen it as he came to this earth with a mission, and it has always given it has always given my profession, my job, my career. It's given me a special sense that there's a higher purpose involved.
Right.
Uh,
And what year was this now, Bob? What year are we talking
so
about?
yeah, so I graduated law school in 1977. And that was the height of the Cocaine Cowboy days in Miami.
Yeah.
If anybody has ever seen the movie Scarface,
Yes.
or the old TV program Miami Vice,
Oh yes.
um, those were those days.
Right.
Those were those days, and there was the days of the Mario boat lift, and there was an influx of mental patients and criminals from Cuba, and Miami became a battlefield. That's the best way that you could say it.
Right.
And so I was a prosecutor in those days, and I rose up to be a financial prosecutor. I did financial crimes and consumer frauds, and there were so many big, big scams down there that ran out of Miami. But one of the things that we did do is we had a civil case against the mob, and we hit them for $72 million, and we were able to clean out their bank accounts.
Wow. Okay.
So I left the DA's office shortly after that, and opened up my office and hung up my shingle, and who should come and visit me. And I tell you, the way that he came in, I mean, he didn't ask for me. He didn't stop at the secretary's desk. Just walked right past her, like he knew where he was going, and I knew who he was. I call him Johnny Giovanni, was his name, and sat down in my front of my desk, and we sat and we looked at each other. And finally, he just said, "You hit us for a lot of money." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "We have pretty good lawyers, and you were able to beat them.
Right.
So we're pretty impressed with you, and we
Okay.
want to send you some clients."
Okay.
So for the next few years, I started handling. Now I got to say, I wasn't like I was consigliere. I was not on the inside advisor.
Right.
I was just I was being referred. I would say they're mid-level management folks.
Right.
They're the wholesalers and distributors and like
Right.
that. And made a lot of money, and got a lot pretty arrogant. And I was hanging out with them, and those were also the days of discotheques and chrome and glass, and a lot of cocaine. And I hung out with them, and I was doing very well professionally, and we had a very nice arrangement that I didn't have to do anything illegal or anything unethical, because it was in their best advantage to have a lawyer that was respected by the court system.
Right.
So we saw eye to eye on that. And but my personal life was falling apart, and I was seeing a therapist. And I came to a very important crossroads. Didn't have to do with them. It had to do with something else, some investments that I was making that, I mean, I was spending money as fast as I was making it.
Right.
And like I asked my therapist this question, and rather than help me work through it therapeutically, he picked up some coins and started throwing them on his table and making mathematical calculations. And I'm sitting there getting more and more pissed off that I'm paying him to be my therapist, and now he's become a soothsayer or something.
Right.
And, comes up with a number, opens up a chapter in a book to that number, and the name of the chapter was Retreat. And I cursed him out, stomped out of the office, but it was what I had needed to hear. And so I started to pull back from some of my excessive behaviors. Eventually, I came back and asked him what that was. It turned out it was a Taoist practice. And I use that word freely sometimes, but for those that don't know, Taoism is one of the three legs of Chinese philosophies. There's Buddhism and Confucianism and Taoism. And so it's a Taoist practice about learning how to, I guess the best way to say it is about learning how to go with the flow. And he told me that's what it was, and it found out that he was the English language editor and a disciple and student of a 72nd generation. Think about that for a second. 72 generations. I figured out that it comes to about 1,400 years.
Yep. Give or take.
Of wisdom being passed down from father to son, generation after generation. So Master Watching Ni from the Shaolin Temple, the Kung Fu Temple, and so I who is a Taoist priest, and I asked him what Taoism was. So I found out he had a little study group, and we started studying. Master Ni came to Miami every once in a while, every month or so, and David, I'm sure that you have at times in your life come into meet somebody or come into their presence when it's like all you want to do is, I don't mean to sound sappy, but all you want to do is like sit at their feet and learn whatever it is that they can teach you. You know,
Oh yeah, without a
you
doubt.
just know this person has it all together. This one's got it. And he did. And so I got to study under his tutelage and with his mentorship for 6 years.
Wow.
And that was transformational. That changed my life.
Can I ask then, Bob, just to take a step back a little bit? So
Sure.
when the gentleman walked into your office that day and asked you, kind of you're a pretty good lawyer, we have some
Mm-hmm.
good lawyers, but you're a good lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any sense of fear? Did you have any worry about what might be? Because you see in the movies, yet again, Miami Vice, as you mentioned, Scarface, even you watch the latest bad boy movies and stuff like that, you kind of go, you know, how did you sleep at night with that over your head, or was it just part of the norm of the environment that you're actually living in?
Mm. I would say this, that in those days, the idea of hurting a district attorney or hurting a judge, of some kind of damage coming to one of those people was unheard of.
Right.
That was something that, the criminal world, they didn't want to touch that because it's like, you don't want to kill an FBI agent because you don't want the whole weight of the FBI coming down on you,
Yeah.
which it would. So I kind of developed a sense of invulnerability in my years with the district attorney's office. And we just didn't hear about lawyers being hurt. And I guess I also, there's also the piece of it that we've heard about with especially certain cultures in the criminal organization, that they have their own sense of ethic and their own way of doing business. And over the years, even in prosecuting them, they don't rat on each other, and there's a certain ethic that they belong to. They don't have a police force to enforce problems.
Right.
So they have to be good for their word. Otherwise, they couldn't do business
Yes.
if they didn't, because they don't have a police force to enforce it. So their word has to be their bond.
Right.
And so there's honor among thieves, so to
Okay.
say. Uh,
There's a movie. There's a movie about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
So
so how
so
then?
I didn't. He was I don't know. There's something about I just didn't.
Right. So how
Mm-hmm.
then, before we move on to the more kind of
Mm-hmm.
the next stage of
Mm-hmm.
when you're under your mentorship, how then did you get out of it? So how did you get out of this world, so to speak, of what would you how would you classify it, Bob? Are you defending them, or are you just kind
Oh
of
yeah, I'm defending them. And a lot of people, that when you talk about criminal defense attorneys in general, a lot of people always have the question, how can you do that? How can you represent people that are guilty? Especially, forget about the organized crime, like these guys. These guys were pretty righteous compared to some of the monsters that I've represented,
right?
the child abusers and the rapists, the child rapists, and human traffickers. I mean, that's really the bottom of the barrel. And so a lot of folks would say, how could you represent somebody that's raped a 6-year-old girl? And So are you asking that question?
No, not even that. I think it's a case of it's. I'd be looking at it, and this is not me virtue signaling or kind of saying anything like that whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But you've gone through college, you've passed the bar, which is
Mm-hmm.
probably such a difficult exam to pass.
Mm-hmm.
And then this gentleman comes into your office and then says this and that, and then what was kind of the light bulb moment? I know you mentioned the book, but
Mm-hmm.
was there more than that over the period of time that you kind of went, no, this is not for me?
Well, that was a process that occurred through the mentorship, but it never occurred to me in terms of representing criminals or representing those kinds of people. I've always honored that, and the reason that I honor it is because the way that the the better the better criminal defense attorneys. Now, I'm not talking about the ones that are just have to make a buck, but the ones the better ones, the good ones, they understand that the police and the prosecutors enforce the law. You can break the law, they'll enforce it. But the criminal defense bar enforces the Constitution.
Right.
We enforce the rights of the people. And if you think about it, the tax lawyers and criminal defense attorneys are the only group of people that stand in between the power of the state and the individual.
Okay.
So it's not like I necessarily want to do it for the dirtbag.
Right.
The dirtbag is only a means for me to be able to make sure that police don't take shortcuts or force confessions
Yeah.
or create or make evidence. If you're going to get my guy, you're going to put him away. You're going to do it, and you're going to dot your I's and cross your T's, and
Yeah.
you're going to do it by the law. And I'm going to make sure that you do.
Yes.
It's, especially here in North Carolina, when you look down east, we have a very lax bar down there, and you'll hear of people all the time being convicted on false confessions or being released based on DNA evidence. How did that happen? The
Right.
lawyer didn't do his job. So anyway,
So
I
did
don't know if that did that answer.
no, no, it
Yeah.
did. It did. I just know where it is. I'm just looking at it. It says internet connection unstable, but it is stable. I can see you perfectly clear. Um, it does actually, Bob.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting because when you then had your mentor, did you leave the
Mm-hmm.
profession? You did.
Well, everything kind of came together in a weird kind of confluence that it was a process, and it was as if all these different forces in my life we're all kind of coming to a point on their own. I'm going to see Master Ni, and I'm studying Taoism, and I'd never been introduced to any kind of operating system for how to live life. We asked Master Ni once, why do they call you Master? And he says, well, because I have mastered life. And then he chuckled and he walked away. He always did that. You'd ask him this big question and he would just chuckle and walk away. And so we asked him what mastery in life was. And he said, you've mastered life when you can interfere the least and have the greatest impact.
Right.
Let me see. Are you still there?
Yeah, still here, Bob. Yeah, I can see it's intermittent at the moment, but
You're
don't worry, I
frozen.
can still hear you perfectly. Just the camera is freezing momentarily, and then it's cracking.
Okay, you can
I
hear me.
can
Okay.
hear you.
Okay.
Okay, don't worry. Yeah.
Yeah. So Master Ni is teaching us, and he's changing our lives. And one of the things that you do in Eastern practices is you cultivate the antidotes to your suffering, and your suffering is caused by your greed, wanting things, or not wanting things, or hating things. I see it, I want it, give me more, gimme, or get it away from me, or I don't understand it. And so the antidotes to those things are generosity, loving kindness, compassion, wisdom. And so what we do in what we learn is to cultivate those things and build those capacities up so that they counteract the other, worse, your non-better angels.
Right.
And at some point, as I'm studying and we're working on building those muscles up, there's something that happens, and I'm not alone in this, and it may sound weird, but there comes a point when your heart opens. And I say that, I mean it, that I mean it literally. I don't mean that figuratively. There's something that happens where you can feel a sensation as if there's something in your chest that has expanded. And once that occurs, the only thing that's important in your life is to ease the suffering of other people. That becomes a purpose that you want to follow. That doesn't mean you don't get angry. It doesn't mean you don't grieve. It doesn't mean you're not sad. But that becomes what you want to do with your life. So that's happening, and at the same time, Johnny's son is arrested and charged with a 15-year felony. And he said to me, the deal's off. Now we want you to break the law. Right. And I said, I won't do that. And so just so happened that I was driving up to New York, and we went through North Carolina in the springtime, and all the flowers were out and the dogwoods were blooming. And I said to my now ex-wife, I said, let's move here. I like it here. I went back and I said to Johnny, Johnny, I'm not going to do what you asked, but I am going to move to North Carolina. And he shook my hand and said, sometimes a man has to move on, and this way we can part friends. And so we were upfront about it, and he was upfront about it, and we shook hands, and I have never heard from them again.
Wow. Okay.
So, and at the same time, I wanted to have a different life. I wanted to have a different life because of the work that I'd been doing with Master Ni. So how cool is this? I got to move to North Carolina, small town, huge culture shock. Huge culture shock. I went from doing homicide cases to prosecuting people for taking antlerless deer.
All right. Okay. Big difference.
It's a crime to kill a deer that ain't got no antlers.
Right.
Big difference. So it's a big culture shock. But I moved here, and it was like there was a blank canvas that I could rewrite my life on.
Right.
Like all of my past, I could leave it in Miami, and now I could just simply rewrite my new life based on who I had become.
I mean, it is
It was
fascinating.
cool.
Do you think is Johnny, is he still around? Is still alive? Do you know, or do you think any of the guys?
I would tend to doubt it because he had a couple of years on me then. I mean,
Right.
I was 27 in 1977, and he was probably in his mid 40s, 50s. So that would put him in his 90s, hundreds
Right.
now.
And
So
when did all that end, Bob? I mean, when did all that kind of the cocaine cowboy
90,
era?
well, I left Miami in the end of the 80s and started over in the beginning of the 90s in North Carolina.
And does was Master Nee aware of all this?
Oh yes.
And what was his what did he say? I mean, what was the what's the conversation, or is it very kind of structured that no matter who is there, you'll be mentored. No matter your background, what's happened in the past, you'll be mentored.
Yeah, yeah, that I would say that's true. Yes, that very little of that mattered. Um, what matters, what matters is taking care with some attention, or I love to use instead of the word attention, I love to use the word attending.
Right.
What matters is attending with skill to what is in front of you at this moment. Do the next right thing. Take care of what's on your plate today.
Yeah.
And in Taoist thinking, if you take care of what's on your plate today and you make a practice of that, you really don't have to worry about the future because it'll all work out.
So what are your, let's say, meditation techniques?
Ah, today, I today I often tell my students. I hope I'm not going too far afoul here, but I often tell my students that when you start with meditation, it's kind of like sex. There, there's there's a there's a whole lot of different techniques or a whole lot of positions that you might try out, and you'll try them out for a while, but then you'll settle into one or two favorites.
That's a very good way of explaining it. So, has any of your students told you what their favorite is?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are people have different ones. My what I do in the morning, I get up early in the morning, and I generally sit for 15 to 30 minutes a day, and I practice what we call breath awareness or breath awareness, where the practice is simply to form an intention to attend to your breath, to
Right.
pay attention to your breath. And most people think that meditation means that you're going to quiet the mind and that you're going to pay attention to your breath, and then you're just going to watch yourself breathe, and you're going to do that for 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 minutes. And that is so not true.
Right.
I mean, I've been practicing for 30 years, and I still my mind when I sit to meditate, my mind goes nuts, and I think about what I have to do that day and what I should have said to that son of a gun yesterday, and whether or not I'm going to remember to get my wife flowers on Thanksgiving or Valentine's Day. So my he does all that, but what what you do in meditation is well, if I could bring that home to an example that I think is common to all of us. um, I'm sure, David, you've been in a situation where you formed the intention to pay attention to something that somebody is talking to you about,
Yes.
and they're going on, or you're in a class and you're listening to a lecture or something like that. and all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but your mind wanders off.
Yeah.
And then there comes a point where you say, "Oh, I'm not listening to this person,"
Right.
and then that's followed by a flood of judgments. Oh, I should have been listening to him. I missed what he said. Now, how am I going to get him to say it again? And I don't want him to think that I was rude or not interested. But it's just a flood of judgments come.
Yes.
But eventually, those judgments, you go through them all. And once you've gone through them all, then you go back and you start listening again, right?
Yes. Yep.
And that is meditation. That is what meditation is. That
Right.
is exactly what it is. Except that instead of saying, I'm going to listen to this guy, you say, I'm going to pay attention to this candle. And then your mind wanders off.
Right.
And so, David, when it was that you noticed that you weren't listening, am I correct in saying that there was a little sensation that went along with that was kind of like a startle? It's
It
kind of like
is. Yeah,
it's
because
kind
you're
of
coming
like
back into the room, so to speak. Yeah.
it's kind of like you go, oh.
Yeah.
It's like your mind said to you, psst, psst, hey, David, you're not listening, you know, right? And you go, oh.
Yeah.
And then, so when you meditate, you say, I'm going to pay attention to my breath. And then your mind wanders off. And then you're back, psst, psst, you're not paying attention to your breath. And then there's this little startle. We call that waking up.
Right.
So that noticing that you're not listening and then going through the judgments and returning and beginning again, that is where the healing of your psyche occurs. It is in the waking up and returning and beginning again
Right.
that the work is done. If your mind doesn't wander, then you don't do the work.
Right.
Then you're either dead or catatonic.
Probably a bit of both.
Or a little bit of both. But it's the waking up and the judgments and the returning and the beginning again. So if you think about everything that happens, first of all, you are able to, if you do this repeatedly, like in 10 minutes, you might do it 8 times. This might happen. Your mind goes off, you return, we begin again. First of all, you learn that it's okay to begin again.
Yeah.
To start over. Most people will give up, or they can't tolerate the discomfort of thinking that they did it wrong or beating themselves up, and then they don't begin again.
Yeah.
And so now you're developing and you're training and you're developing the skill of allowing yourself the freedom to have wandered, and now you begin again. So you all of a sudden you're learning this radical idea that it's okay to begin again.
Right.
And also you are noticing your judging. So after you do this for a while, you start to notice how much we judge. Judging all the time. I like it, I don't like it, it's black, it's white, it's good, it's bad. We're always judging. And because we judge all the time, the old expression, judge not lest you be judged?
Yes.
Well, a lot of people think that has something to do with, I don't have the right to judge, that's God's right, and when I go to heaven, then I'll be judged then. But I think that it's because you and I know that our brains work basically the same. Otherwise, we couldn't have a conversation.
Yeah.
So if I'm judging a lot, then I figure you're judging a lot, and you're going to be judging me.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely true.
so,
Everybody,
so
no, you're right. Yeah.
right. So the more I judge, the more I figure you're like me, and the more I'm feeling judged.
Yeah.
So now, as I begin to watch and notice my judging, I'm not doing anything. I'm not trying to stop it. I'm not trying to quiet it down. I'm just noticing it. I'm getting familiar with it. it's almost as after a while, it's almost as if I get bored of it.
Yeah.
And as you begin to get bored of this judging, because you're noticing it now,
Yeah.
if you're not noticing it, it has power. It goes on and on. It's automatic. But when you start noticing it, after a while, you really kind of get bored of it, and it goes away on its own.
Yeah.
And as it goes away, you start feeling less judged.
Yeah.
Now, meditation, and here's another thing that people meditation is not about making you a good person, and it's not about making the world a better place, although it will, and it will make you a better person, but that's not what it's about. It's about learning to live a happy life. It's about learning to be happy.
Yeah.
It's what it's about. And what you learn when you spend time with your thinking is you learn that the path to a happy life is a path of kindness. It's a path of compassion. It's a path of forgiveness. It's a path of non-judging. It doesn't mean not discerning. I mean, you don't step out in front of a bus, uh, but so it's you learn that the path to happiness has all those qualities to it, and in effect, you become that person that you want to be.
That's a great. It's a great explanation, and it is your what you're saying is correct. You know, there is times where, in any time of the day or life, you know, we do have this habit as human beings that we just judge,
Mm-hmm,
and we as you said mentioned then over time, then you kind of just it becomes boring, and then you just switch off, and then you move on to the
mm-hmm,
next thing to judge, and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
it's no, it's fascinating. Can I just ask then, Bob, your book Children of Abraham? So
mm-hmm.
it explores the themes of redemption. So what is that about?
Well, it's a novel, and it's a thought experiment, really. Um, because I didn't grow up in a religious family, when I was introduced to Taoism, which again is, you have to understand, Taoism is not a God based philosophy.
Right.
Okay. So there's no angels and devils and demons and hell and heaven. There's none of that. It's just, it's just the instructions on how to live a happy life. As I said, how to live in a way that you influence and interfere with other things the least, but yet have the most impact, and how to live life in that way, how to be happy. That's what it's about. Um, so religion has always intrigued me. I read when I was in my teenage years. I read a lot of science fiction and God themes and universal energy themes and energy creatures. They're all part of the world of science fiction. And science fiction authors like to play around with this idea of universal intelligences and greater intelligences and stuff. So it always made me curious, about how things work. Like one of the things that I was always and still am very curious about is this concept of substitutionary atonement. Jesus died for our sins, and for a person that didn't grow up with that and is just told it and accepts it, you have questions like, well, how does that work? Is
Yeah.
there some kind of like sin energy that like floats around in the world? And he was able to suck up some of this energy. I mean, what are the physics of that,
Yeah.
process? So I wondered about that. So anyway, I said, what would happen if God ceased to be a question of faith but became a reality? Would people really listen anyway, or would they somehow discount him even if he was right in front of them?
Yeah.
It's just a thought experiment. So I thought, how could I bring God down to the earth in a way that I could write a novel about it? And the way that I did it was that mysterious messages start to appear on the ticker tape on the bottom of your TV screen,
Okay.
allegedly authored by God. Like, you're
Okay.
all my children, God. I gave you a paradise, don't destroy it, God, you know,
Like a text message. Yeah, God.
like little text messages are starting to appear. And, they first, it turns out everybody thinks it's a hoax. But then stuff starts happening that you can't be denied. And if you speak one language and I speak another, we each see the ticker in our own language. So things start to happen which make it undeniable or like unexplainable to begin with. But there is a big push, to not explain it. Of course, there's still a lot of denial. And the question is, does my mafioso character, is he able to compartmentalize and say, well, God, as long as he doesn't interfere with my business, he can do whatever he wants? Does the sex addict character that I have, is his understanding of, or even his acceptance of the reality of God, is that powerfulness to overcome his addiction? What about arrogance? What about slothiness or laziness? So what about these human faults? Which ones of them are redeemable? Which ones of them are outside even that? So I created a world with several characters, kind of like the movie Crash, all these different plots converging, with each one of them had one of the seven deadly sins. So there's desire and slothfulness, and I've got a corporate greed, sociopath, and all of these folks with all of these faults. And the question is, how does the world and how do they begin to respond to the actual presence of this universal intelligence? And it's kind of like Crash meets a Dan Brown novel,
All right.
But it's more of a psychological thought experiment than it is a religious one. I just use the mechanism of God's messages to create dramatic tension.
Right.
Uh,
No,
so
it's
that's
brilliant. I mean, I'm on your website here, awiseandhappylife.com, and
mm-hmm,
you have a meditation 101, you have meditation classes, you have mindfulness mentoring, you have your blog, you have poetry, you have the books, which we've mentioned one already. The other one is I Am the Way.
mm-hmm.
So what services do you actually provide, Bob, in terms of for mentoring and for meditation?
Well, when after studying with Master Nee, came to North Carolina. There's not a lot of Taoists here. Started attending some Buddhist temples, and in Buddhism, meditation isn't a strong practice in Taoism, but it is in Buddhism.
Right.
And so I started meditating, and at some point, some folks reached out and they asked me if I would engage in a 2-year training program to become a meditation teacher. Very intense program, and I did. And I came out of it, with this starry-eyed belief that now all I had to do is teach the world how to meditate, and I was going to change the world. But it's a hard conversation.
Yeah.
People say, I want to meditate. And I said, well, would you could you find 10 minutes a day? I don't know if I could find 10 minutes a day.
Mhm.
I said, well, you could get up 10 minutes earlier. Oh, no, I ain't getting up earlier. You know, it's just a hard conversation to have with folks, especially if you say, they said, well, how did you learn it? I said, well, I sat on a cushion for 30 days, 30 minutes a day for 2 years. And I had structured classes every week and blah, blah, blah. And I went to 4, silent retreats. And they go, well, forget that. So when I retired from the law in 2015, earlier on in 2012, I got here and they told me that there was something going on at Duke University I should look into.
Okay.
And Duke University is right down the road from
Perfect.
Elon. It's perfect. So I found out that they were doing some deep research there, trying to answer this question: how can we create a way of teaching meditation that has some immediate benefits, like reducing anxiety, increasing sleep, doing some stuff like that that people really want.
Yeah.
How can we develop a program that is attractive to the Western mind of, like, I want it now,
Yeah.
not 2 years from now. I want it now. So they developed a program that is a 5 week, 1 week of orientation, 4 weeks of practice. So I could say to you, David, this is what, if I were to say, well, if you want to take my course, David, I would ask that you meet with me for an hour and a half once a week for 4 weeks.
Okay.
And I will teach you some techniques during that time. Then I will ask you to take this app, which I will have provided you with, which they developed at Duke University. They developed this entire digital infrastructure. And I'll give you this app, and everything that I teach you will be on the app.
Yep.
And there'll be guided meditations on the app. And I'm going to ask you to practice 10 minutes a day. So all I'm asking you for is 1.5 hours a week to meet with me and practice 10 minutes a day. But when you do your 10 minutes on the app, it'll open up a log. And I want you to log whatever it is that you're feeling at the end of that 10 minutes.
Right.
And then that log, like, I usually have like 15 students. When I teach on campus, I always have 15 students. That all those 15 logs come to my dashboard, to my computer. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and after I go through my morning routine, I sit down and I read each of those 15 logs and I respond to them.
Right.
I actually type in coaching and an answer, and that goes back to their app. And before they do their next practice, they get to read the teaching.
Well, that's very
So
cool.
yeah, so I'll get a log that says, oh, I don't think I meditated at all. This was a terrible session. I just feel more anxious now than I did before. There was a dog barking, and the more he barked, the more upset I got. And then I was distracted, and I didn't even listen to the guiding of the meditation. And then all of a sudden, it seemed like it was just a minute, but then all of a sudden the gong rang and it was over. So I didn't even meditate. It was terrible.
Right.
I get that log, right? And so then what I get to say is, wait. You think it's terrible. I think it's great. First of all, you had the experience of starting with a little bit of annoyance, but as it continued, you noticed that your annoyance grew. So now you know what it feels like when your annoyance grows. That's a big tool, because that's going to show up in your life a lot of times when you start with a little bit of annoyance and feel that annoyance grow.
Yes.
So at least now you have an ability to notice when that's happening. In a little bit, maybe we can learn about some ways to shortcut that when you notice it. So that's great. You also notice that the time felt like it was compressed. So you notice that, you're being upset has an effect on your perception of time.
Yeah.
This is all good information. It's all good data. There's not much you can do with it right now, but you're gathering some really good data. This is going to be really helpful in the future. Good work. Good job. Keep it up. And they get that coaching right away, the next day,
Right.
after it happens. And so in 4 weeks, they will get 30 messages from me, 30 daily coachings from me, which is the equivalent of almost a year's coaching if you're meeting with somebody once a week.
Right. Okay. So
And
it's
so
very cost effective. It's very cost effective. Yeah.
It's very effective. And what's wonderful for me, and where I get my life, and what I would almost pay somebody to let me do this, is that I get to watch their minds transform.
Yeah.
I get to see the struggle in the beginning with, I'm not focusing, and me saying it's okay, to when they get it in about a week, all of a sudden, oh, now I see what you're telling me.
Yeah.
And then when they start to realize that a lot of their thinking is not even their thinking, it's their father's thinking or society's thinking or the conditioning. They start to realize that it's not even theirs, and they are not their thoughts. That's the big one. When I see in their logs, oh, now I understand what you mean when I'm not my thoughts. I'm the creator of my thoughts. I
Yeah.
have thoughts. I am not my thoughts. I have thoughts. When they separate themselves from their thoughts, all of a sudden a freedom comes into their lives that they didn't even know they had. And I get to watch that. I get to watch that happening. It's just so cool.
But it's a great purpose for you, Bob, isn't it? It
Oh,
gives
it
you
is.
purpose. Yeah.
It is. Yes.
And as I say, well done and all that. The where can people get in touch with you or organization or individuals? How do they contact you? What's the best way to contact Bob Martin?
On a wise and happy life.
Cool.
Um, the first thing they can do is they just go there, and they ask a lot of questions about how to get started. I put it all in a 40-page downloadable ebook, free. It's absolutely free. I wrote it because people ask me all the time. I'm tired of answering the same questions all the time.
There's your time
So
and your patience,
I,
dude.
I put it in a book. So you can go there and just download the book, and you can read the book. And that's a great way to get started. I've also got a lot of resources on my webpage, and I've got a little biography of me, and then I explain the classes. So all of that's available on the website.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, Bob, there today. I great insight and amazing work that you're doing now. So, my hat, my Irish hat is off. So
Thanks.
congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Once
Thank
the
you.
podcast is released and approved, it'll be on all the platforms, and I'll put all the links in for Bob and his website, which is awiseandhappylife.com. Thanks so much, Bob, for chatting with me.
Thank you, David.